Go live, we'll count up a little bit. How's everybody doing out there? Wednesday night. I think there are like 8 baseball playoff games today. That was weird. Just one
So what
after
do we
another
think?
after
We're
another.
actually going to see the Steelers and Titans this week, or you think it'll end up getting
Yeah,
blown off?
probably. I sure hope so. I sure hope so just for the people that work for the Titans so they don't have to be on pins and needles. We'll see. We'll see. It'll be a better game than Packers Falcons. I'll say that.
And
So,
it's going to
but
be interesting to see how everything pans out if they wind up having to try to reschedule somehow. I don't know how
yeah,
that'll work for them or us.
right. Well, I think I hope that it's okay if it's Tuesday. It'll be part of week 4. Let's go ahead and do our build into week 4 IDP round table, and we'll go live. Who is the real Kevin Pierre Lewis? Doesn't matter. That and more this week on the IDP roundtable. John Norton, we talked a lot about Kevin Pierre Louis last week. Based on last week, will we be talking about him more this year?
I'm not sure that we're going to be talking about him a whole lot more. The roller coaster ride seems to come to that point where we're getting ready to go down that big hill into the tunnel with him, I think. Uh, Not only has the numbers gone up and down, 3 tackles first week, 10 tackles the second week, 3 tackles the third week, but now he's losing snaps to Thomas Davis, who's finally completely healthy and starting to get on the field. There was, I think, Pierre Lewis had 78% of the snaps or something like that this week after playing 100% the first 2 games. Um, Thomas Davis starting to creep back in there. We don't know for sure if he's going to start seeing his role increase. If it does, it'll probably be at the expense of Pierre Lewis going forward. So, the best case scenario, Pierre Lewis still has a 75% snap count on a fairly consistent basis and has some up and down games. And, he might be worth keeping on a roster for bye weeks, especially with the way guys are getting hurt and all the other stuff that's going on. We may get really deep before the season's over, but I don't think he's going to be a guy you want to count on to start every week.
Matt Schauf, currently number 1 in the Draft Sharks Invitational. You're not actually allowed to win that, are you?
Oh yeah, I am, baby.
You are?
Oh
The
yeah.
fix is in.
Money on the line.
The fix doesn't necessarily end with Tracy Walker. It was just more Patricia Hannigans or something. With the roller coaster ride, speaking of the roller coaster, what direction is the roller coaster going with Tracy Walker right now?
The arrow is pointing up on Tracy Walker, just like it is on my DS Invitational team. He's back to full playing time in week 3, and it was at the expense of Will Harris, who was the guy who was creeping in on the snaps early on. It sounds like the Lions have not been pleased with the way he played through the first 2 weeks. So his playing time was down in week 3. Tracy Walker was back up. Tracy Walker gave us numbers. Shocker, every time that Tracy Walker is on the field, he does that. I think that normally I would be skeptical when a guy jumps back up from half playing time to full playing time. But in week 1, we saw Tracy Walker play about 80%. I think even if he settles in at 80%, that's enough for Tracy Walker to give us usable tackle totals. So I'm going to go ahead and believe in him now and wait for the Lions to prove me stupid for trusting anything from them again. I'll put a pencil in my ear. I'll grow my facial hair out a little bit, and I'm going to play the Lions safety.
Yeah, Cecil always likes to put a pencil in his ear anytime we talk about Matt Patricia. There's a lot in there. Like, you just keep pulling them out. John, if you had week 3 in the Christian Kirksey injury pool, you won. There were 2 good weeks there. Ty Summers, not necessarily his best game, but a solid output. Is this ambulance chasing, or is there something here?
I think there's something here at least for the short term. We haven't really found out how bad Kirksey's shoulder injury is. What we're kind of hearing is that they're thinking it might be several weeks. If that's the case, then we probably get some pretty good run out of Summers. They not only got into the lineup after Kirksey went down, he played full time the rest of the game. The guy's a second-year player. He hasn't really had a chance to get on the field much at the NFL level, but he looked really good last year during the preseason, and there was some talk about him possibly landing a starting job then, and it didn't work out, or at least he didn't play a whole lot. But the guy's he's basically physically he's a clone of Kirksey with the size and so forth. Very similar type of player, and I think he's a good fit for the scheme there and what they ask the players to do at that position. So I don't see any problem with Summers having pretty good stat numbers going forward, especially in tackle columns. I don't see a whole lot of big plays from him, but we don't usually get a whole lot of big plays from the Packers middle linebackers as it goes anyway. Definitely somebody for a short term. You might get 2 or 3 weeks out of him. You might get 6 or 7 weeks out of him, but he's worth adding.
And the bonus with Ty Summers is that he's named like the golden-haired from any high school or college movie in the 80s.
Yeah, I was going to say he's like on the San Dimas high school football, from Bill and Ted or something like that. Absolutely. The theme here, Matt, is changing value with these linebackers. So KJ Wright, if you had KJ Wright coming into the year, maybe you were disappointed. You liked what you saw in week 3. Maybe he was on your bench. Maybe he's on the waiver wire. What do we think is coming going forward?
So here's another one like Tracy Walker, where I would be skeptical if we didn't have some history here. He came into the season, I think it was a knee injury now. I'm forgetting if it was a knee or a hip. I'm pretty sure it was a knee injury, though, with KJ Wright, that put some question on his durability. And then the Seahawks were reportedly looking to play less base defense because they were so excited about Marquise Blair, who was safety, corner, hybrid, nickelback. He went down in week 2 for the rest of the season. So he's out of their plans now. I would not be at all surprised if that changes their approach going forward. And it just so happens that KJ Wright went from 56% playing time in week 1 when they had full Marquise Blair to 71% against the Patriots when Blair left the game early, and then 100% in week 3 against Dallas, which was the first game that they played without Blair. I mean, they've long trusted KJ Wright in all phases and all sub packages. He plays against the run. He plays in coverage. So I wouldn't be surprised if the combo of him getting healthier and further removed from the knee issue and Marquise Blair going out, so them not trusting the extra pieces in the secondary as much, I wouldn't be surprised if that means full playing time for KJ Wright going forward. So he's another guy that right now I would go ahead and trust. If you're considering starting him this week, I'm not saying make him, a top 20 starter this week, but if you're considering starting him, I would go ahead and take a shot. We'll see where the playing time goes this week. It's certainly a fine spot against Miami. There's upside there. So we'll see the playing time here, but I think KJ Wright's about to turn back into a fantasy starter.
Yeah, and again, you mentioned Marquise Blair. Jamal Adams a little banged up too, so that could also be part of it. More opportunity there. Speaking of opportunity, John, got to go to you. Definitive voice on all things Bengals. And the Bengals linebacker group is a moving target. What direction is it moving right now?
I don't know how far it's moving, but it needs to be a moving target going forward for sure. Because Logan Wilson is definitely stepping up. He really hasn't he saw a little bit more playing time this last week, not significantly. I think he had 7 more snaps than he did the week before. But the more this guy gets on the field, and the more you see him show up in the stat lines, the more you see him show up when you're watching the game. He just makes those plays that pop, that catch your eye. This week he played, I think, 32 snaps, something along those lines, had 5 tackles and an interception, had a game-changing interception that really kind of kept the Bengals alive there at that point and got, they didn't win a game, but they didn't lose this week either. So things are looking up a little bit. But I think on the other side of that, we're starting to see some decline in Jermaine Pratt's playing time, not playing as well as they had anticipated, not really making those type of game-changing plays. So, Wilson, we haven't really seen it start to come about yet, but the way they're looking on the field, it almost has to happen pretty soon where Wilson starts seeing an increased role, and I would not be surprised to see him in that 70% role by midseason.
John, Cecil hates ties. He hates them. Like every time there's a tie in the NFL, it just puts him in a bad mood. But I told him this one was good because sometimes neither team deserves to win. We need that. We need that sometimes. Logan Wilson, folks, get in ahead of that curve. Let's do something fun here, Matt, because I think that it's, I don't want to say it's easy, but certainly step one is taking things at face value and reading them as an indication of the direction things are going. But sometimes we don't believe what we see, or we have reasons to think that you shouldn't act on these things. Let's go through these one by one. I want you to tell me why you don't believe these week 3 results or results through the first 3 weeks of the season. We were anticipating Micah Kiser being in the middle or inside for the Rams. He was doing well and then dropped off a cliff. Was it him? But do you believe this week 3 stat line?
I believe this is just a blip for Micah Kiser, and he's going to deliver for us. Good first 2 weeks, then a down week against the Bills. For the past few years, the Bills were a gimme for linebacker scoring. This year, not the case, because all of a sudden they got Stephon Diggs, and now they're the pass-heavy, pass-happy Bills. They're throwing the ball. There's less available for linebackers. They're way down in terms of providing points to linebackers. So I say watch out for the Bills linebacker matchup right now. Keep Micah Kiser in lineups going forward.
Okay, next one for you, Matt. Dave Gettleman did something good. Leonard Williams is a pass rusher. 2 sacks through the first 3 games. We believe in it?
No. I mean, you can see a guy go through a year, maybe 2, of these hidden pressures that are going to turn to sacks, and then maybe it happens. Leonard Williams is not that guy. 2 sacks through 3 games. I don't believe him. He's 3 games into his 6th NFL season. He has 19 and a half career sacks. He had 1 season of more than 5 sacks before this year, and it was back in his 2nd season. Is his role that different? I don't know. I haven't watched all the tape and compared it to last year or what he played for the Jets, but I can't imagine that he's doing that much different, that the Giants have put him in position to finally unlock his pass rushing. I think this is the kind of thing that was just a flash, and I would not trust it.
Okay, I think that there was a Bill Cosby movie back in the day, Leonard Part 6 or something like that. This is Leonard Part 2. Leonard Floyd, who was reunited with his old linebacker coach from Chicago, the Rams. Usually we talk about him in terms of potential unfulfilled. Will it be fulfilled?
I mean, that's a good point. But he didn't really ever deliver for that linebacker coach in Chicago. He had 7 sacks back as a rookie in 2016. Looked like he might have been on his way. Since then, 4.5, 4, and 3 sacks. This year, he's got just 6 total pressures through 3 games. That's not really a very good number for somebody who has 2 sacks. It means he's not generating a lot of pressure behind that. If we were talking about a Wade Phillips defense, obviously there's a long history of Wade Phillips getting guys to produce, even if they didn't before Dante Fowler. But Wade Phillips is not there anymore. First-time defensive coordinator is there. So between them, I'm going to need it to be proven to me before I'm trusting Leonard Floyd.
Okay. It's the Patriots. And so this one you might have to really talk me to, because it's the Patriots. They can lose all 3 of their linebackers. They can have no-name pass rushers, and they just find somebody. And they get the career year, and then that guy goes and signs for a lot of money, and then they get a 3rd-round compensatory pick, and it starts all over again. Shalik Calhoun.
Here's the thing, is that Shalik Calhoun can deliver for the Patriots and not for us. Last year, we were chasing guys like Adam Butler. We were chasing John Simon at times, and the playing time is all over the place, and it makes sense for them to fit it to who they're playing that week. But Shalik Calhoun has a sack and a half so far. He's still sub 50% snap share. He was a 28% playing time guy last year for the Patriots. He entered this season with half a sack for his 4-year career, so maybe he's finally breaking out, but as a top 24 D lineman in fantasy right now, I don't believe it.
Okay, did we find some reason for the Jets? You pick up Brian Poole, you take advantage of all these solo tackles, and you put him on your IDP roster. You believe in it?
We get this every year from Brian Poole for like a 2 or 3 game stretch. It goes back to Atlanta. It happened last year. He played every snap in week 1. It was down to 61% in week 2, 77% last week. Last year, he was a 77.5% playing time guy over his 14 games. That was his first year with the Jets. That's what he is. He's not going to be on the field all the time, and the Jets are not going to make opponents throw the ball a lot against them. So maybe we'll get a couple more games from Brian Poole. Maybe he, has this special year in terms of solo tackles this year. But no, I don't believe it. I think that it's coming back down.
Okay, the last one I'll toss over to you, John, because I know you've got some interest in this one too. Taylor Rapp. I mean, if you would have asked me in August, I would have said Taylor Rapp is one of the linebackers. Really, he's a safety, but this is a guy you want because he's going to be a safety playing linebacker. And we barely saw him in the first 2 weeks. Week 3, a sign of life, but is it legit?
Well, that depends on how long Jordan Fuller's shoulder injury takes to recover from. As long as Fuller's out, yes, Rapp is legit. We're still kind of waiting to find out how bad that is or what the expectations are there. But that was the reason Rapp got back on the field. Fuller left her, I believe, in the first quarter, about halfway through the first quarter with that shoulder injury, didn't come back in. Rapp stepped right back into the same role and did the same thing that he did all year last year, wound up with 6 tackles and an assist and just put up generally good numbers. And he's a good player. He plays well. with the decision to put Fuller in ahead of him had to have been a close call by the coaching staff. I'm not sure why they went the way they went, but whatever it was, Fuller played well and made good numbers for us as well. So both of those guys are valuable when they're playing. So it all comes down to the injury recovery. As long as Rapp is able to stay on the field, I think he's definitely going to be somebody we want to have in our lineups. When Fuller starts to come back, the other issue that could be there is that shoulder injuries tend to linger a little bit, and guys are not quite as aggressive when their shoulders are sore because they're afraid they're going to re-injure. So we've seen a lot of good players that kept playing through these injuries and just weren't the same after they happened for several weeks or sometimes the rest of the season. So it's kind of up in the air. Again, short-term, Rapp is definitely going to be solid for us, but we need to watch and see how long Fuller's going to be out.
Yeah, Fuller did put in a limited practice Wednesday, so we'll see about this week, and it sounded like they were optimistic. But, of course, we saw Tremaine Edmonds put in limited practices all 2 weeks ago with his shoulder injury and then sit out Sunday. So it'll be something to track all week.
Yeah, maybe
Shoulder
an
injuries
intercept.
are fickle.
Yeah, and Fuller or Rapp with Daniel Jones this week, maybe ball hawking back there. John, is Brian Burns the next great pass rusher? Are we watching him blossom and becoming the cornerstone of this rebuilding Panthers defense?
I don't know if he's the next Julius Peppers or not, but I like what I'm seeing from him so far. The big hang up with him when he first came into the league was that he was relatively small and struggled to hold up versus the run. He hit the weight room hard. Since his rookie season, he's put on 15, 18 pounds, something like that. Definitely has improved as a run defender, and it's got him on the field 75% of the snaps over the first 3 games. So he's definitely getting the run on both pass rushing opportunities and against the rush. He's got 9 solo tackles, 2 assists, a sack, a forced fumble, and a pass defended through 3 games. So the opportunity is definitely there. I like what I'm seeing from him so far. I don't know that he's ever going to be a 10-sack, 40-tackle type of guy, but he is definitely worthy of a roster spot and a starting spot for a lot of managers.
Let's just watch to make sure he doesn't paint the skeleton on his face like Latimer from the program, though. Then we might have to worry.
Yeah, Burns had some ugly tape in college defending the run and just didn't necessarily seem to be the most physical end, but I think that he's turning the corner now. Turning the corner, pass rushers. Let's continue on that theme, Matt. Tennessee, right before the season, that feels like forever ago. They bring in Jadeveon Clowney. We already know they have a sack artist in Harold Landry. Jeffrey Simmons, that pick's working out. This is going to be a defensive line that is generating a lot of pressure, and they have the game scripts to match with the offense. It's not there yet. Is it coming?
Yeah, right around this time of year, I like to start looking at guys who have not gotten sacks yet but are generating pressures, looking at the Pro Football Focus numbers for guys who do have hits on the quarterback or just hurries. We've got Jadeveon Clowney and Harold Landry both near the top of the league, especially among edge players in total pressures. 0 sacks from either guy. I believe we have 15 total pressures from Clowney, 12 from Harold Landry, 0 sacks from both of them. I think it's coming, especially with Jeffrey Simmons coming on, perhaps playing his best game so far last week. Week 4 against the Steelers, I don't think it's going to be breakout time for any sackers for Tennessee. But beyond that, week 5 against the Bills is a solid spot, a spot that could have some sack upside, could be tougher. But then after that, there's Houston, a week 7 bye, and Cincinnati. And I think between those 2 games, we should see a real pickup in sacks from these guys. And we might see the Tennessee team defense become a thing. But certainly, I think Jadeveon Clowney, Harold Landry are going to be worth considering putting in pressure-friendly lineups for those 2 weeks.
John, Jordan Phillips, once a highly touted player, been around. See him putting up sacks. This is like do you believe it? Do we believe Jordan Phillips going up against Carolina this week? Can he keep this up?
Definitely, maybe. I like what I've seen from Phillips. He played the tackle position last year, put up really good numbers as a defensive tackle with the Bills. I think he had 9 sacks and upwards of 40 solo tackles. So the defensive end position in a 3-4 is similar responsibility-wise, so he's a really good fit there. We haven't seen the tackle numbers materialize yet. I think he only has 3 tackles and a couple of assists in 2 games, but he does have a sack in each of the last 2 games. So if you're in a league where the competition is pretty stiff as far as picking players up and you need to kind of get ahead of the curve on somebody, he might be worth going ahead and picking up. I don't know for sure that he's going to be that guy that emerges, but we know the history is there. We know the potential is there. We know the scheme is not too restrictive with Arizona. We've seen some of their defensive ends put up decent numbers in the past. So definitely worth adding. I'm not going to put him at the top of the pickup list by any stretch yet, but it might be somebody that you want to beat your opponent to in some competitive leagues.
Matt, the curve on another Matt Judon, down. Is there a up curve to get out ahead of with him?
Yeah, Sig, in our sleeper league that we both play in that has IDPs, somebody tried to trade somebody tried to get Shaq Barrett from me for Matt Ioannidis last week, and I passed on that because I thought that Shaq Barrett had a breakthrough coming, and it did happen. 2 sacks against Denver this past week. I think Matt Judon is facing a similar get-right stretch coming up. He's got 0 sacks through 3 games. He has 10 total pressures over that stretch. According to the PFF grading, he's not playing as well right now as he was over the past 2 years. I'm going to go ahead and bet on a guy that Baltimore franchised a year after letting Zadarius Smith leave in free agency, even though Matt Judon's a little older. I think Matt Judon is a good player, and I think he's about to rebound. He's got Washington, he's got Cincinnati, he's got Philadelphia over the next 3 games. I would not be at all surprised if Matt Judon has sacks in each of those games. So I think if you're in a pressure-friendly league where trading is, realistic on the IDP side, I think Matt Judon might be a buy low right now before it happens.
If you bought low, John, on Danny Trevathan when he started slow, you were kind of happy about week 3, but there's a but. Give us the latest on Trevathan.
Well, you're happier than you were after week 2 when he only played around half the snaps, but you're still not as happy as you were last year when he was getting 100% in a lot of the games. We still really don't know what the deal was last year with the inside linebackers between Roquan Smith not playing full time. It seemed like Trevathan had that every down role, 100% of the snaps in a lot of games, and Roquan Smith was the 80-85% a game guy. It seems like they've kind of maybe changed roles this year. Trevathan has been under 100% every game, 52% week 2, 78 to 80% or so the other 2 games. It just feels like they're trying to keep him from getting hurt because injuries have been a major problem for him over the years. So maybe they're thinking if they reduce the playing time a little bit, it might keep him healthy a little bit longer there. I'm not sure what the thought process is with the Bears, but it's definitely not helping us any with him not getting the full-time snaps. So he's a guy that's worth hanging on to as depth. It may be a bye week fill-in, but he's definitely not somebody I'm going to trust in my lineup every week at this point.
Matt, we may not be trusting Corey Littleton in our lineups right now. What's up with that?
Apparently, he's just not playing very well. I mean, last year, he missed 1 tackle all of last season. He missed 9 tackles all of 2018 as a first-time starter. This year, through 3 games, he's already missed 6 tackles. And, I mean, that says it. And, I mentioned PFF grading before. I like to use that to see if a guy's not producing, look at that and see if it's a matter of, he's playing well, the opportunities are going to come. But if he's not playing well, as Corey Littleton is not, it's just not somebody to trust. The Raiders are sitting in the same range as the Rams were last year in terms of run-pass split that they're facing. So I don't think it's a matter of not seeing the plays that favor his style. He did make nearly twice as many solo tackles on pass plays last year as he did on run plays. So it's a different system. Maybe he's just still getting used to his role. I'm not sure exactly what his issue is, but he's playing poorly, and he's somebody to try to not put in your lineup right now. They're playing Buffalo this week again. I just mentioned you would think Buffalo past couple of years could have been a get-right spot for linebacker scoring. I would try to sit Corey Littleton against the Bills, and I guess we'll see beyond that.
John, Jared Davis been a disappointing pick. He's one of those Lions picks. As soon as they took him, you're like, well, is this going to work out? But you also see the Lions kind of emulating the Patriots. Matt Patricia emulating his mentor when they took Jelani Tavai in the second round. Is he going to not just make up for what Davis isn't doing on the field for the Lions, but give us someone to look at in IDP leagues?
And we got two things here. Number one, the Lions have turned into Bill Belichick West.
Right.
The way they approach things with their defensive guys. And number two, they haven't had a really great linebacker in Detroit probably since Chris Spielman, which goes back quite a ways when I first started playing fantasy football. So dealing with those two issues, Davis has just about been phased out. He has never been a great linebacker, but when for several years there, he was at least their lead man, their main guy calling the defenses and so forth. And we're starting to see Jelani Tavai take over that role. He played 89% of the snaps this last week to Jared Davis's 23%. They were on the field together a handful of snaps, but Davis is definitely the forgotten man at this point. Unfortunately, even though Tavai is still getting all the playing time, we haven't seen that materialize into production in the box scores just yet. He was a tackling machine at Hawaii, so hopefully that is coming. He was a little more of a big play threat there as well. Forced quite a few fumbles, I believe, during college. But at this point, if his name's not Jamie Collins and he's a linebacker in Detroit, keep him on your bench until we see somebody emerge and grab the bull by the horns here.
Trying to get out ahead of this Cleveland linebacker situation, Matt, one that was unsettled coming into the season and doesn't seem to be any more settled right now. It could become more settled, but what should we be watching for other than a really intriguing matchup between Cleveland and Dallas?
Yeah, Mack Wilson came back last week, but he only played 6 snaps. It was his first action since he hyperextended that knee back in the summer. I think that his playing time will grow. We'll see how much it's ready to grow this week, but I think that it won't be too long before he passes Malcolm Smith and Sione Takitaki in snaps. Neither of those guys, I mean, Malcolm Smith has been a solid player for years on different teams, but he also can't hold a job, so he's not a stellar player. Takitaki has not been playing well this year, so I think it's just a matter of time before he comes out of the lineup. I do think that BJ Goodson's going to stay on the field, though, in the middle there, had been wearing the green dots, so I think that he'll continue to be a full-time player. I think there's room for both him and Mack Wilson to play full-time snaps and put up numbers, and I would imagine that the Browns will settle on those two guys as their regular linebackers, and finally we can maybe actually start these guys with some level of confidence.
Always wearing the green. Go ahead, John.
I agree that those will probably be the two guys that they settle on, but I was pretty disappointed in Mack Wilson's production last year with the opportunity that he had then. Watching him on the field, he seemed like he was just always a step late to get into the tackles, and it just didn't materialize in the box scores the way it should have for the amount of playing time that he had. Maybe a second year in the system will change that, but I'm not real excited about him, even if he ends up in a full-time role.
Yeah, I was surprised that Mack Wilson had as many fans leading into the draft as he did, and I was not surprised that he disappointed those who thought he was going to be a first-round pick and lasted until round 4. I don't think either of these guys are particularly good players, but they landed in a real good spot, and playing time can cure a whole lot when we're looking for IDP production.
When you're looking for IDP production, the green dot always on the helmet of the guru with the starts and sits. Jason Wood called it the triangulation week 3, John. Now we've got 3 data points. With that data in mind, give us some starts and sits for week 4.
All right, some guys I want to get into my lineup this week. Max Crosby from the Raiders defensive line's finally starting to step up a little bit. Week 3, we got some pressure from both of their defensive ends. Even Clellan Ferrell finally showed up with 4 tackles. He still didn't get to the quarterback yet, but we're starting to see a little bit of action there. This is more of a case of believing in Crosby than it is any expectation that Buffalo's going to struggle to keep the quarterback upright. But I like what I saw from Crosby last year. I like what I saw from him this past week. I think he's finally starting to get things going a little bit. I like Kerry Hyder and Eric Armstead against Philadelphia. The O-line woes in Philadelphia are still present, although they've gotten a little bit better. Cincinnati got to them, I think, for 4 sacks last week. So if you're giving up 4 sacks to the Bengals, you still got some issues to deal with. They have allowed 11 sacks on the season now. Both of those guys are very capable edge defenders, edge rushers, so I like their chances of landing one. I like Trey Hendrickson this week against Detroit. The Lions have allowed 4 sacks in each of the last 2 games, and Hendrickson has been playing pretty well. And hopefully he'll be able to stay on the field even when they bring the injuries back into the fold a little bit and get some playing time. Bobby Okereke this week against Chicago. And this one is kind of iffy because I'm kind of counting on him seeing a lot of Jimmy Graham, who has been Chicago's most targeted receiver so far. Okereke is still had 2 games in a row now that he's been in the 3-down role over Walker. So it looks like that's going to be something that's going to be here to stay. And I just think with his size, speed, and athleticism, he's a good matchup. And I got a suspicion because he's going to be playing on the strong side, he'll end up matching up with Graham more often than not. Vince Williams versus Tennessee. Williams excels as a run defender, which should give him a bump in playing time against the Titans, who are a bit of a run-heavy offense. His other quality is a good pass rusher. So with a few extra snaps and a good opponent, a good matchup, and potential of getting a sack as well, I think he's a quality start this week. I'm looking for 5 or 6 tackles and a sack from him this week. Jayon Brown versus Pittsburgh. Hopefully this game will play in time for us to use it for this week, and we don't have to count it as a bye week for these guys. But Brown got off to a quiet start, finally came to life last week, 6 tackles and an assist, and a pass breakup against the Vikings. Houston's inside backers accounted for 17 tackles last week with this matchup. Alexander Johnson was 6'2" the week before, and Blake Martinez went 8-4 in the opener. So we've got some good stats to look at there as far as Brown having some good potential. I like Alexander Johnson this week as well against the Jets, which is kind of surprising when you think of how bad the Jets have been playing. But if you look at what's been going on with their opponents, Fred Warner went 9-3 against them. Darius Leonard had 7 tackles and 4 assists. Both of those were in lopsided losses. I think Denver is, with all the problems that they've got injury-wise and the struggles that they're dealing with, this game could be one of the closest ones that the Jets play for a while. Could be a lot of opportunity there. C.J. Henderson versus Cincinnati. We've touched on this one for the last couple of weeks. Casey Hayward, 12 tackles in week 1. Tavier Thomas, 9 tackles in week 2. This past week, we saw Avonte Maddox and Darius Slay both have 7 solo tackles against the Bengals. Cincinnati is not running the ball well. They're throwing it a lot. They're completing a lot of short passes, and a lot of these guys are having plenty of opportunity to make tackles, 6-7 yard gains and so forth. So C.J. Henderson showed us that he's not afraid to tackle. I think he'll get plenty of opportunity this week. I like Rayshawn Jenkins against Tampa Bay. Judging from last week, Brady may have finally convinced Bruce Arians that tight ends can actually catch passes. So with Godwin, Gimpy, there could be a lot more of Gronk in the game plan this week, which usually means a busy day for a strong safety. And that's a solid matchup for Rayshawn Jenkins there. Like Julian Love and Logan Ryan both this week against the Rams. Jabril Peppers is gimpy. Got a low ankle sprain, which is usually easier to come back from than a high ankle sprain, but chances are he will at least be limited this week, even if he is able to play. The Giants are struggling horribly, and Love is coming off of a 10-tackle game, and 4 safeties have recorded at least 6 tackles and 3 assists against the Rams over the first 3 weeks. A couple guys I'm going to get out of my lineup this week. Trey Flowers against the Saints. New Orleans has allowed 1 sack, and Shaq Barrett is the only edge defender with more than 2 tackles against them. He had 3. And I'm going to sit all my Raiders linebackers this week against Buffalo. We've already touched on this one a little bit. Littleton has not been very productive. He's struggling. It's unclear if Nick Kwiatkowski is going to be able to play this week. There's some potential that he might get back out there and try to go. And no linebacker has more than 5 solo tackles against Buffalo to date. And we already talked about Micah Kaiser this past week, bringing up whether he was even somebody we could rely on. If you go back the week before that, we saw Jerome Baker have 1 tackle and 5 assists with this matchup as well. So I think it's more Buffalo than it is the players when that situation.
you all out there are the players that we aim to serve and get you over the hump in your IDP leagues, recording every hump day Wednesday at 9 Eastern. And you find us, of course, on the Audible feed. Thanks as always to Matt Schauf, Draft Sharks extraordinaire at SCHAUFDS. You can catch him on a lot of great Draft Sharks podcasts also. And the guru, John Norton, you know his work, especially from Eyes of the Gurus, part of your Football Guys subscription for IDP players out there. You get a lot of great stuff from the IDP team. We thank you for playing IDP Fantasy Football, the only real fantasy football. Good luck in week 4 and stay classy.